You sleep at night, but you wake up already feeling tired. Not sleepy, just mentally worn out. You check your phone almost without thinking. You feel busy throughout the day, but later it's hard to explain what actually drained you. Even on days with nothing urgent, your mind doesn't feel calm. This doesn't feel like burnout the way people usually imagine it. There's no breakdown, no constant stress, no clear moment where everything becomes too much. You still function. You still get things done. Life keeps moving, but your energy feels thinner than it used to. Focus takes more effort. Simple tasks feel heavier. And rest doesn't fully reset you anymore. That's where the confusion starts. You begin asking quiet questions to yourself. Why does my mind feel tired, even when my body isn't? Why do I feel on all the time? Why is it harder to feel interested or deeply engaged? What many people are experiencing now is often called silent burnout. It's called silent because it doesn't interrupt life enough to be obvious. It blends into daily routines and starts to feel normal. Silent burnout isn't about working too much. It's about never fully switching off. In everyday life, your mind is almost always engaged with something. Messages waiting to be answered. Information constantly coming in. Something unfinished sitting in the background. Even when you stop working, your brain doesn't really stop. You might sit down to rest, but your mind stays alert. It keeps checking, scanning, processing. The issue isn't that any one thing is overwhelming. It's that there's no real pause. The brain doesn't get tired only from stress. It also gets tired from constant attention. Modern life keeps your attention lightly engaged all the time. You're rarely fully focused, and you're rarely fully at rest. Most of the time, you exist somewhere in between. That middle state slowly drains mental energy. This is why silent burnout feels so hard to describe. You might think, I'm not doing that much, or other people seem to handle this better, or maybe I'm just not disciplined enough. But this isn't a personal failure. It's a nervous system responding to an environment that never fully quiets down. In the past, effort had clearer endings. You finished something, then you rested. Now, many things don't end cleanly. Work messages can arrive at any hour. News updates never stop. Entertainment fills silence instead of giving the mind a break. So even rest is filled with input. Your body may slow down, but your brain doesn't receive a clear signal that it's safe to power down. Over time, this changes how your days feel. You don't feel extremely stressed, but you also don't feel deeply relaxed. You live in a low-level state of alertness. Motivation becomes inconsistent. You still want to do things, but starting feels harder, and finishing feels more tiring than it should. Not because you don't care, but because your mental energy is already partly used. Another common effect is emotional dullness. You still feel emotions, they just don't feel as strong. Joy feels quieter. Stress feels constant but mild. Nothing feels urgent, yet nothing feels fully satisfying. Life becomes something you manage rather than something you experience. Because silent burnout doesn't look serious, people often ignore it. They assume this is just adulthood, or modern life, or something everyone deals with. But living in constant mental activation keeps the nervous system slightly tense all the time. Not enough to cause panic, just enough to slowly exhaust you. And because there's no clear cause, people turn inward. They blame themselves. They think they're lazy, or unfocused, or falling behind in some invisible way. But silent burnout doesn't come from weakness or lack of effort. It comes from living in a world where the mind rarely gets a clear stop signal. When attention is always required, even in small ways, mental energy wears down quietly. Not enough to break you, just enough to make everything feel heavier. That's why this state is easy to miss. It looks like normal life. It feels like something you should be able to handle. But it isn't about handling more. It's about understanding what constant mental engagement does over time. This isn't something you fix in a day. And it isn't something you solve with productivity tricks. It begins with noticing the pattern instead of blaming yourself for it. This channel exists to talk about these patterns, clearly and without exaggeration, to explain why so many people feel mentally tired without knowing why. Not to push solutions, not to optimize you, just to make sense of what's happening, because once you understand the system you're living in, you stop treating normal responses as personal failures. And that shift alone changes how heavy everything feels.